Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm Matt Leary. As Paul mentioned, I work for a group called TelcoTitans. Some of you, I think I may even see a few subscribers in the room. We are a media and analyst group focused on telecom leaders. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. I have three esteemed gentlemen with me. And this first panel, we call this the AI kind of checkpoint. And we're really focusing on what's at stake, what's the business context today for telcos with AI and, of course, data. I'm going to ask the first question to each of these folks, and they're going to kind of give a little bit of introduction, but a special thanks to Christoph. Last-minute substitution, but I think we did very well at our substitution. He works for Kearney, and I'll have him introduce himself and Kearney in a second, but he's just come out with a new report, and actually I'll see if I can move that successfully here, on the state of the European telecom market, and you call it a health boost, and that's a need of a health boost. And specifically, my first question is about you're concerned that the telecom industry, especially in Europe, is not ready to take full advantage of AI. So let's kick off there. Describe a little bit of what you think this current state is, and do take a second to introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. I'm Christoph, non-creation partner based out of our Munich office with Kearney and working in the mostly telco industry or TMT sector for many years now. Focusing on Europe, but I mean, our industry is quite a global one, so active also globally. We brought today also this report to you, which you can see here on the screen, right? I didn't bring a QR code. I should have done this, but I mean, if you Google some of these words like Kearney, Telecom, Health Boost, etc., you'll find the website immediately also to download and have a look at it, right? That report is centered around an index where we basically score the European markets for its sector health in the telecommunication industry, right? This is driven or substructured into financial, technology, consumer sentiment, commercial, and business environment. And we find a lot of things that I'm happy to share in a bit here. But please have a look. And we also base this on the one hand side on proprietary data, but also on a consumer survey, also to get the customer thinking and behavior captured as well, right? So in a nutshell, I mean, the state of the telco sector in Europe we see is in need of a health boost. I think that's a good tagline to it. Why is that? Because the financial returns have come under pressure. Technology investments still remain very capital intensive, but also the customer expectations are growing or rising along with it, right? And to be honest, the commercialization ability of telcos is at the moment not that great. It's really hard to extract returns on those network and technology investments that have been made in the past. Yeah? And on top, it's one of the themes of all the keynotes here at Mobile World Congress, the business environment. It's tricky to be in Europe and at the same time to compete with the US tech giant, with US telcos, but also on the Asian side with Chinese telecoms, etc. In those markets, I mean, you see that there's few players, and in Europe we have 90 players, and so it's really hard to achieve certain scale, right? Coming back to your question on AI, right? So I mean, what we do see a lot is that it doesn't lack in ambition, right? I mean, there are great ideas in telcos about AI, and but it often actually lacks a unified vision or a North Star across all the function the telco has to offer, what it is we want to achieve, right? And that together with very siloed organizations forms an inability to actually scale and to succeed in AI, right? And this is something that trickles down also into the number one constraint when it comes to executing on AI for telcos is data readiness and data integration, right? And here we see like that data is not accessible, is not real-time accessible. And I mean, in the future, and I mean, we will go into that as well, right? You want to have trigger-based interactions with your customer, right? You want to know when there's a new, phone installed, etc., and you want to be active as a telco and be able to address and to commercialize on that. Let me pause here.
Sure. And again, you've mentioned twice efficiency, and I'll kind of put the next question to Justin, and Justin, I'm sure you'll take a minute to introduce Wavelo, but you're also the CEO of a scaling company right now. You've been in several of these situations where I know you've mentioned in the past that the investor community is getting fed up with some of the inefficiencies that Christoph has mentioned. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are you hearing from that community, and kind of what are they expecting of the telcos to do different to kind of maybe calm some of those fears?
Yeah, and Matt, I don't know that it's necessarily the frustration is new. It's just building and compounding, and so I'll kind of unpack that and then talk about why it's getting worse, which is to build on your point. The frustration kind of goes like this: there's waves of consolidation going on across telecoms globally, and it certainly varies by geographical region and by access type. And imagine you're a private equity firm that's going to roll up 4 or 5 or 10 telecoms, and you've done that in other infrastructure funds. You've done it in insurance or finance or fintech, and then you go to kind of buy these companies, and you realize, okay, I've got construction synergies, I've got revenue synergies, I might even have some deep finance, back office, people synergies. But then I go look at the tech stack, and it's 300 different systems, and none of the portfolio companies you're buying are on any of the same systems, not just some of the same systems, any of them. I talked to one of the operating partner, one of the largest private equity firms in the world, and he told me that they bought 2 companies last year that each had $200 to $400 million system spends, and they had not a single system that overlapped, right? And then you get into your point around interoperability, and you go, well, even if I don't have the same systems, okay, maybe they'll work together. Maybe we can do some integrations. And then all the data is kind of locked in there. But this is compounding for 2 more reasons. One, convergence. This is even worse when you're buying a fiber company and then a mobile company and try to do that together. That's even less likely that you've got common systems. And then AI is driving this. And it's partly because for the first time since the smartphone came out, you have finance professionals that can go on a weekend and build an app in Claude, and they're seeing that efficiency, but then not seeing it in what the technology teams are doing. And so it's creating this and we're seeing this in how the public markets reacted in the last couple weeks to what people think about what should be happening versus what's actually happening in the market.
Yeah, and you kind of point to this that plays into your research quite well. This idea of we need to fast track this, right? In fact, the report that Appledore has out right now is titled "Fast Tracking Telco Modernization." So, Patrick, let's talk a little bit about this idea of the role of agentic AI in telco systems. Can you talk through how deep those AI efforts are today, and where you see kind of the near and short-term future of what we're going to get out of that?
For a minute. Yeah. Patrick Kelly with Appledore Research. So our focus is looking specifically at the telecommunications market on 2 sides of the coin. One is operators wanting to grow their revenue and using agentic AI as a means to help personalize services, for example. On the other side, which Justin and Christoph were talking about, is the operational efficiency of the operator. If you look at most operators in the world, they're spending about 80% of their total revenue in operational expenses. So it's an enormous number. There's a chart up that Matt just put up. We did a study. Now I'll frame it up that we're still in what I would call a nascent market, but we're seeing a lot of operators move from proof of concept and deploy these agents in a production environment. I'll give you an example. I mean, one of the big things that operators deal with is customer churn, and there's a lot of calls that come into the call center. One of the things that this technology can be used for is to help with call deflection. In fact, a number of tier 1 operators are already deploying that in their environment and saving tens of millions of dollars in doing that. We did a 5-year forecast, so we're in the early days of deployment here, but we anticipate the market will be worth $6 billion just in the telco segment. And we've segmented that into 4 areas. There's the IT tooling area. I know Justin will talk about that a little bit, but that's further along. You have digital enablement. I talked about personalization. There's a lot of investment going on in that area. We see service management and operations as another ripe area in terms of investment, but we think the investment cycle will be a little bit longer. There's a lot of work going on right now in and around things like mobile RAN optimization, things like root cause analysis and anomaly detection, and areas around field force management that are priorities in this segment. Those sort of deployments will show up later this year and into 2027. And then network security, which is another area, bringing together what's happening in network operations with security operations. And that's another area where the technology can be deployed.
Yeah, I mean, this is exciting upside, but one of the things we set up our panel, there are some rocks, right? So maybe a follow-up to that analysis, and my question is, what are some of those rocks? What are those maybe seemingly unmovable boulders that we have to get through? What's holding them back to kind of, realize?
I mean, Justin hit on it because you have, in many cases, there's a lot of M&A going on. You're bringing in a lot of different tools and systems. You have many data silos. And for these agents to work, and you'll see across the floor, a lot of people are talking about how these agents can optimize the workflow. You need an underlying data structure. You need a knowledge graph. You have to understand the relationship, which is not only from the network, but also how the services overlay on that, and how it impacts customers. And it's that semantic reasoning that becomes the foundation for this forecast. In fact, if you don't do that, these numbers just don't play out. So that's an underlying problem that a lot of the operators have. I mean, when you talk about rocks, Matt, they're looking at ways in which they can solve that across their environment. We're not going to move into another data lake, data warehouse environment. So how do you tap in to all these data sets and get the right sources of data for these agents to actually work against?
Yeah, and Christoph, go ahead. You
Sorry.
along the same lines. You saw some of these boulders when
Yes.
you compiled the data for your report. So where do you see boulders and where do you see hope, I guess, is my question.
Absolutely. And I wanted to also add to what both of you have been saying, right? And I ran a little pulse check with telco CCOs here at Mobile World Congress in 2026. Let's keep that in mind, right? And I also asked them, what's the main constraint? What's holding you back to use AI to better serve your customers, to do better customer value management, right? And as before mentioned, it was obviously data readiness. But also it's the legacy systems, right? I was asking them, okay, like which use case are you doing more on the efficiency side, or is it more about, cross-selling, personalization, upselling, and so on? And the response was, and it was quite surprising, Christoph, I just can't, right? I need multiple months, 10 to 12 months to launch a new product. Yeah, I can't even differentiate my pricing because I have so many legacy IT systems in fixed and mobile and so on, that I'm so constrained, right? And so that's something that needs to be solved, right, or overcome. And I think what gives us hope, right? I think there's a great solution to that, but also as the direction that you pointed out, Matt, is towards agentic AI. Is there a way to not wait for the perfect data, not wait for the perfect IT systems to be in place to still get going and to start building work in a imperfect data environment over legacy IT while modernizing at the same time underneath that, right? And that is giving me hope.
Yeah,
I'm interrupting.
great transition to Justin. Maybe take a minute to introduce Wavelo properly. But the first question I think you and your team asked is OSS BSS dead, right? So we think about Spectrum Network, OSS. These are huge expenses that are part of this maybe seemingly legacy tech debt. But you guys have a little bit different take on that. Maybe it's not dead, but we can do something about it to kind of enable the agentic. You want to take a second?
Yeah, and to build on your point and to pull that thread, it's not waiting for a perfect environment. And our view is doing that through an event-driven platform and architecture as a way to, you've got a brownfield environment. How do you start to get value now and then eventually move to something that's a little bit more modern that enables this AI first era? In the previous innovation eras, when the smartphone, they keep going back to that because it's the closest thing we have and it's not even close, right? It's the closest thing we have, but it's not even close. I used to talk to my teams about, you're not competing with your competitors, you're competing with their last best experience.
Yeah.
Because for the first time ever, your telco app sat next to your Uber app. That compounds massively in an AI era where you have a shrinking interface layer. And so to all the points that have been made, if you can't get the data out and you can't provide a delightful experience right there, you lose like people coming to your website, coming to your app. It's all happening in another interface. And if you don't have a way to work inside your legacy environment, get that data flowing in a human-centric manner, you can't bubble up those experiences. And it has an efficiency component. ARPU falls, churn grows, and you ultimately have this really challenging environment while you're trying to spend CapEx and build your networks and do those things from there.
Yeah, and so we'll kind of finish before we open to the panel, to the questions from the floor. But I'll ask all the panel to kind of respond to this question. I'll start with the optimistic analyst and consultant first, then I'll talk maybe to the realist last. We talked about some of these walls. They seem insurmountable. When you live in this telco environment, those silos seem hard. But you both have talked about being bullish about AI and agentic AI's effect in this in the telco environment, and specifically in telco systems. What makes you bullish?
$1 trillion will be spent on this market this year, just in building out the infrastructure. So the question on everybody's mind is, how do I monetize this? Because it's a massive capital investment, 3 times what all the telco operators in the world spend it on. And so, if you look at any conversations that we've had on the floor, right up to the C-suite, they're asking their teams, how can we deploy this and get greater efficiencies in our organization, help us drive revenue, drive a better customer experience. I just want to come back on the point that Justin made, which is, if you look at a lot of the systems that are in place, they're not going to get ripped out. They're very sticky. A lot of these OSS systems and BSS, they're in, once they get installed, they're there for decades. And so we need another way to tap into rich data sources to allow these agents to actually perform well. At the end of the day, the measure of success is going to be on the performance of these agents, where you're offloading a lot of the work that's done manually today by technical staff and customer care agents.
So bullish both on the efficiencies, but potential that what could be made of those efficiencies from a revenue perspective. Christoph, you often sit between, Kearney sits sometimes between the investors and the telcos. Same level of bullishness in that respect?
I'm bullish, yes. Why is that? The telco sector, I think, is one of the most advanced sector and the pacemaker also for many other industries, right? And it has been under pressure constantly. And if you think about it, agentic AI can be the next disruption to the telco sector, right? If in the future agents on the customer side, negotiate the next tariff with a telco through an agent interface, how to differentiate, how not to become just a, let's say, dumb pipe or a connectivity provider for a fully homogeneous good, right? But these situations have been there before, and I truly believe that the telco sector will do everything that it can do to avoid being fully disruptive. And this competitive and also the cost pressure, as you mentioned, that will make it absolutely inevitable to now prepare for a future that is driven by agentic AI and to be ready for that, right? And as I said before, it will also help to, let's say, work in these environment with imperfect data, with a legacy IT system and so on. If it also helps to work in this environment and to make telco successful in this, I can remain very bullish. Yeah.
So let's go to real projects, real customers. You've seen the best and the worst with some of the projects at Wavelo. What makes you bullish?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm like a bull head and a bear body. So I'm like,
that's an ugly picture.
It's mostly bullish, I think. I think that the last 24 months we've seen what this tech can do. We're all using it. It's changing our workflows. It's changing our lives. And now the next 24 months outside of the frontier models is doing all the work, all the infrastructure, all the plumbing, the $1 trillion to get everything out, and going into the really hostile environments and saying, like, to your point, these things aren't going to change. We need to change some of it to be able to get the data out and to orchestrate those things to get the customer experiences that we need and start to show that value. And then I think we'll see that next tranche. If we don't do that in telecom, what will happen is exactly what happened in the last AI summer 10 years ago, where we ended up with a bunch of chatbots and a bunch of IVRs that kind of solved customer problems, but never actually got into the core part of the business to drive that real meaningful value. So I'm bullish that we'll do it. The risk is if we don't do that, we won't get the value that we expect.
So before we turn it out to any questions, any last comments on bullish or bearish or anything else that you're worried about that you wanted to raise before we open it up for questions?
The only other thing, and this is a topic in itself, is the whole discussion around sovereign AI. It's probably we could take up another hour talking about that, but I think we've seen pockets where investments are incurring. At the end of the day, it's like where is the value in what telecommunication providers can deliver to either their enterprise customers or the consumers? Where do they fit in the value chain? I don't think it's a bad thing if you are providing connectivity. You don't need to be, an Apple or a hyperscaler. Stick to your core business. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you can expose your network to a larger development community, and maybe do something, creative that cuts down the cycle time for class of service, quality of service, particularly for those enterprises that will use this for new applications across a whole assortment of industries.
Okay, I know we're just out of time for panel time, but we do have about 5 minutes, I think, for questions, right, Paul? So just any questions in the audience? Again, we're in the context layer here of what's working, what's not. What are some of those boulders that we talked about?
Thank you. When the operators are successful and they implement, is the opportunity automation and efficiency, or are they, building new businesses and opening new opportunities?
We just had this conversation. Yes, mornings. Is it
Can I start?
yes? Yeah, go please.
Okay. It's funny. It was one of I had 5 questions for this CCO pulse check that I had, right? And I was talking to chief consumer or commercial officers of telcos, European telcos, and they said, the value of AI is specifically in churn prevention, retention. This was the answer that was given the most, but actually also in terms of efficiency and getting our cost to serve down, right? And I did not expect that. Yes, efficiency is, let's say, the easier part of the equation. But the telcos or the CCOs also shared with me, we are just not there yet to drive our acquisition with AI to improve this personalization and to turn that really into value, and also to better do upselling, cross-selling, customer value management. But I do believe that's a journey, and going forward, you will be able, through the help of AI, to better do contextual campaigning, to better address the customer needs, have like trigger-based offers towards those customers based on network experience, but based on customer experience, based on events in the customer journey, right? Where the telco basically can do the best offer for a given customer, right? So there's a lot of value, but we're not there yet. At least what the CCO shared with me. Yeah?
Comment on that?
I'll just say that, it depends on what segment of the market you're talking about for the telecom operator. So, if you look at the mobile consumer market, it's highly saturated. You're seeing low single-digit revenue growth. This is on the revenue side, but there's other potential new markets that could open up. We did some sizing on the enterprise market, and we think that over the next 3 to 4 years, that could be worth another $100 billion with the use of the infrastructure that's actually getting built out right now. The bigger opportunity, I think, that actually falls to the bottom line is if you can get much greater efficiency in the operational domain. All the things we talk about, make your customer, your call center more efficient, try and predict where why those calls are being generated, improves things like, NPS score, customer sat, things of that nature. Um, it's a very capital intensive business that service providers are in. How do you optimize the network infrastructure? Really, how do you optimize and provide the best quality of service that you can? There's been a number of, I mentioned field force, truck rolls are still, we're talking about problems that existed 10 years ago, 20 years ago. How do I, instead of doing 2 truck rolls, get it down to 1 truck roll? If you can use agents that help in the anomaly detection and even help with route optimization, skill of the technician, do you have the right equipment on the truck? All those things can be optimized, and you don't need human beings for that. You can apply the technology. So I think, in some segments where we're talking about revenue growth, um, you know, uh, we see some opportunities. The bigger opportunity, I think, is really on the OpEx side, because that'll fall right to the bottom line. So, say you can just move the needle 3 or 4% on the OpEx side. That all just falls to the bottom line.
Justin,
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of the calls. I agree with everything that you both said. I think that there's a really interesting opportunity that we don't yet see yet on new businesses and growing ARPU. I mean, when we all came out of university, well, maybe not you, but when the 3 of us came out of university, uh, there wasn't a job called influencer, right?
yeah, no.
But now that's an entire profession, right? And if you think about telecom trying to build VAS, like ARPU growth through VAS, which is cloud storage, security, all these things,
Right.
you might be able to go back into your old bag, your old product roadmap and say, oh, actually, security might work now. It didn't work before because we were never going to invest what we needed to do in monitoring because ADT was going to beat us because they had a massive war room of people. But now I have an agent that can monitor my house, and maybe I can sell that for $10 more on the side, right? And as convergence comes into play, you both have the cost to serve items that you were talking about, but you also have that share of wallet shifting and you have a captive audience. And so I don't even know if we know yet what the products might be able to be launched as we see these things kind of grow. And I would encourage operators to think a bit about that and go back into their old notebooks and say, did this fail because it was a bad idea, or does it fail because it was too expensive and we just didn't have the tech for it at the time?
Any other questions? Alex, yeah, please.
Anyone who pays attention to the capital markets has watched the software stocks go through the floor. I mean, some really big names are down 50%. And that's on the basis that AI is going to eat their lunch big time. But for that to happen, surely at this telco scale, you've got to have the data sorted out. Otherwise, that just seems, it's not going to happen. So that's the sort of starting point. But then with enterprise software at telco grade, is that realistically going to happen at all? And then just to throw a little angle on top of that, is there a regional side to this? If you look at the way the world works at the moment, the US market, if there's money to be made, it will move fast. If there's innovation to happen, Asia Pacific moves fast, and Europe does its European thing. So if there is a massive value change here and multiples change, an AI-ready, data-ready telco could be valued at multiples more than one that's not. So first, how dangerous is it? And is it actually going to happen? And if it did happen, could that have really quite severe consequences that European operators are even more exposed than they are already?
Yeah.
Since Justin runs
Yeah.
a software firm, let's put him on the hot seat.
Are you on my board? Yeah. My board definitely asked you to ask that. There's a couple things. There was a really interesting thread, a couple of private equity CEOs this past week before Mobile World talking about this, where if you step back for a second, only 12% of all software companies are public. So we're really seeing, we tend to take that as, well, that's what's happening for all software companies. Most private equity CEOs and partners aren't seeing a huge drop in demand, with the exception of a number of the places closest to the customer. So if you are in the interface building business, that's a challenging place to be. But to your point, as you work your way deeper into the stack, a system of record, a place where you have lots of customer data, places where you have deep network integrations, that there's more of a moat around that. And if folks running those companies are willing to make the shift that a lot of us talked about and you noted at the end of your point, which is, hey, I'm going to make this interoperable. I'm going to make this data available safely to all of these agents and to all of the folks. When you see the shift, maybe things go away from professional services into internal IT teams. Maybe you see that shift to some of the SaaS providers. When that shifts around, you can play in all those spaces. You can kind of make multiple bets at once. But if you stand still and say, well, I've got such a moat because I built this, CRM system and it's the greatest workflow management system in the world, someone's going to vibe code that, to smithereens. And so I do think you have to be really thoughtful about what's your moat, where's the data, and are you going to play nice in the sandbox so that, to Patrick's point, you've got interoperability for agents and you're letting anyone ride on those rails.
So a lot of those software vendors are your customers. So I'll put you on the hot seat. Is there speaking specifically the telco market, which for some of them it's their prime, some it's one of the markets. Are you seeing the fear as much, or?
Well, I mean, just on Justin's point, like, where do you build your moat? Because everybody's probably read The Innovator's Dilemma, and we've seen great companies go out of business. For me, like, when I look, Sandra's going to come up from Dell, and you look at companies like Nokia and Ericsson, they have a lot of domain expertise. So that's pretty strong moat. They have tribal knowledge. They've built this into their products. They're going to use this technology. So can they be squeezed out? I don't know. I think the reference was to the IGV index, and you got companies like Salesforce and ServiceNow, 25-30% of their market cap gets wiped out. They were probably overvalued to begin with, from an investor's point of view. Is AI structurally going to change the game for them? Possibly, but I don't think it's likely because, again, you've got this methodology, this workflow, the domain expertise. I think it's less likely. I mean, I think it's a bit overblown, but we'll see how things shake out.
So I want to thank our panelists, Justin, Christoph, Patrick. I know you have to get a flight, Christoph, so we'll get you off stage. Thank you for this, and thank you for the questions.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.